Welcome back to our series of Love Your Neighbor, No Exceptions. Liturgically, we have just completed the joy of the Christmas season. Today marks the first day of the ordinary time of the church year. It is an appropriate time to reflect on our basic rights and responsibilities as the disciples of Jesus. In this series of Love Your Neighbor, we have been focusing on the significant themes of Catholic social teaching. Our first theme is the life and the dignity of the human person. Without exception, each person is made in the image and likeness of God. No humans are illegal. All are to be valued and loved. The second theme reflects on our call, our privilege to live in family and in community with one another. Recalling the words from the book of Genesis, it is not good for man to be alone. We are better together in our family life and in our community. Today we focus on the third theme on rights and responsibilities. People have a fundamental right to life, food, shelter, health care, education, and employment. All people have a right to participate in decisions that affect their lives. Corresponding to these rights, our duties and responsibilities to respect the rights of others and the wider society and to work for the common good. The great commandment of Jesus is that we are to love of God and love of neighbor. All of our rights and responsibilities are viewed in the context of the great commandment to love. Love thy neighbor, no exceptions. Every person has a right to life and human dignity, but these rights can never excuse us from our responsibility to serve and to love our neighbor. The following passage from the Acts of the Apostles describes how the first Christians understand the meaning of their rights and responsibilities. They devoted themselves to the teaching of the apostles and to the communal life, to the breaking of the bread and to the prayers. Awe came upon everyone, and many wonders and signs were done through the apostles. All who believed were together and had all things in common. They would sell their property and possessions and divide them among all according to each one's need. In this passage from the Acts of the Apostles, the early Christian community is described in an ideal fashion of how the early disciples shared everything they had with one another. They used what they had for the benefit of everyone. This is the way we are still called to use our gifts from God. But this Garden of Eden vision of church did not last. The evangelist Luke will tell us the story of how soon the community became stained with sin, greed, and lies. We can be quick to assert our rights and resist any intrusion on these rights. In the news, we are always bombarded by various groups that are demanding their rights be heard. Yes, we have a right to worship God. We have a right to health care, to adequate housing. We have a right to fair wage for the work we do. With a gospel perspective, however, our responsibilities outweigh our rights. Following the example and the command of Jesus, we are to love and to serve and to be responsible for one another. Perhaps our biggest deception is when we emphasize our rights without regard to our responsibilities. As a church, we are to live in community. We are called to be a people of God. Our spirituality is relational. Any individual right I have needs to be balanced with my responsibility to love my neighbor. We are all made in the image and likeness of God. There is dignity and beauty in each person God has created. But we must also confess that we are all sinners. We live in a world that stands in need of the healing forgiveness of our loving God. My desire for my individual rights can too easily become too self-centered. Indeed, they become too self-centered if I lose focus of my responsibility to love and to serve my neighbor. The Catholic tradition teaches that human dignity can be protected and a healthy community can be achieved only if human rights are protected and responsibilities are met. We strive for that Christ-like balance of celebrating my rights and dignity as a child of God and my responsibility to love my neighbor, no exceptions. As we reflect on our own spiritual journey, we clearly see that our spirituality is relational, our relationship with God and our relationship with one another. And we first experience this spiritual journey in our family life. The family is the school of love. For me, my 5 brothers and sisters reminded me often that it wasn't just about me and what I wanted. The vision of my mom and dad was that we were family and we are to love one another. That message, first learned in the context of family life, is the vision of the spiritual journey for all the days of my life. How do we value our own dignity and uniqueness, and at the same time honor and love those who don't think like me, pray like me, vote like me, or speak like me? We celebrate our uniqueness and still value that we are a community of brothers and sisters. In our parish life, we celebrate that we are a stewardship community, and we embrace a spirituality of stewardship. We give thanks to God for our giftedness and our blessings. We celebrate that indeed we are God's beloved sons and daughters. The fundamental rights we enjoy are a gift of God. Each one has an inherent human dignity that is to be respected and loved. There is no place for prejudice or hatred or gossip that destroys the beauty of another. As stewards of God's grace, we are missioned to lift up the dignity and the beauty of one and all. We are to be the witnesses to the love of God in our family and in our community. And as we continue to wrestle as a nation, as a community, and as a parish, how do we best deal with the COVID pandemic that has gripped the whole planet? The whole planet is hurting. On the one hand, the case is made that I have the right to do what is best with my own body, whether I get vaccinated or not, or whether I wear a mask or not. On the other hand, the case is made that I have a responsibility to love and to care for my neighbor, and therefore I should get vaccinated and wear a mask. This can be a very polarizing argument in which each digs in and dialogue is lost. What is more important, my individual rights or my responsibility to care for my neighbor? Each one of us as disciples of Jesus must hear our call to serve one another in love. This means that we must cease trying to be self-centered in the exercise of our rights at the expense of our commitment to build up one another in love. I will conclude with the words of Jesus at the Last Supper. By this all shall know that you are my disciples, by your love for one another. Amen.